Welcome, everyone. I'm Corby Kummer, Executive Director of Food and Society at the Aspen Institute, and we're here at the Conversations with Great Leaders in Memory of Preston Robert Tisch series. I'm particularly fortunate today to be joined by guests who couldn't demonstrate leadership better. The series began in 2009, and it features leaders who are making difference in their community by the way they look at their role in helping to build and maintain a civil society, something very much needed right now and in the past year. These leaders represent values and commitment to public good that reflect the beliefs and practice of the man honored by the series, Preston Robert Tisch. We always want to thank Stephen, Lori, Jonathan, and Lizzie Tisch, and the Lori M. Tisch Illumination Fund for their generous support of the program. And I personally have to thank the Lori M. Tisch Illumination Fund and Rick Loveclass at the fund, and Lizzie and Jonathan Tisch for making possible the restaurant guidelines that we're going to be talking about today, along with leadership in the restaurant and hotel industry. So I'm very fortunate to be joined by genuine leaders. And in order of appearance, they are Amanda Cohen, the James Beard nominated chef and owner of Dirt Candy, the award-winning vegetable restaurant on New York City's Lower East Side. We were just hearing about how she came up with the name. She invented it. She took it from no one. It has entered the lexicon for vegetables and wonderful things to grow. She's also been on Iron Canada, perhaps is the only undefeated chef on Iron Chef Canada. And has been one of the genuine leaders of restaurants all through the pandemic. And we'll be talking to her about how she came to assume that role. Jonathan Tisch, the CEO of Loews Hotels and Company, and co-chairman of Loews Corporation. He's a leader in the hospitality industry and has been very active in NYC and Co., New York Rising, Rising and top 10 business leader in Crane's New York Business, author of 2 books on leadership, host of a TV series about being a CEO and how to be a leader. And also, I happen to teach at Tufts University, and there's an entire Tisch school really named it for civic life, a subject of today's series. And he's been honored by New York University. He's Tufts alum, a proud Tufts alum, and a generous one. Russell Jackson, owner and chef of Harlem's fine dining restaurant Reverence, who began his career in California, with Russell's in Los Angeles, San Francisco restaurants, James Beard nominated Black Cat, and also the undying enemy of Amanda Cohen on Iron Chef they were sharing. So we're going to hope that they're able to play nicely on the same panel. They certainly have been playing nicely in their work on the Independent Restaurant Coalition. And Russell came every week to our Safety First Working Committee meetings and was really the guiding force and the soul of the restaurant safety guidelines that, with the generosity of the Tisch family, we were able to bring out to the world. There's much more happening with trainings. The CDC Foundation is so proud of our work that they supported us to build out trainings for public health leaders. So it's really thanks to Russell's guidance and the exemplary leadership of Amanda and the Chief Vice President of Operations and Safety for Loews Corporations, also part of our working committee. So I'm enormously admiring of our leaders today. Thank you for joining us. Amanda, when the crisis began and you had to close a restaurant, could you guide us through some of the, I would say, agonizing, am I over dramatizing, decisions you had to make to help protect your workers, what it was like to help guide them through it, and then a step I don't know about, how you came to join forces with other restaurant owners and chefs in the same situation?
Yeah, so closing the restaurant, that was pretty devastating. We hadn't started to feel the pandemic at the restaurant at all. We were busy up until the sort of last day we got the news and it went really fast. It was like, okay, you have to be at 50%. The next day you have to be at 25%. And then basically the next day it was, you have to close come that. I think they closed restaurants on the Monday or the Sunday, and the 50% was on the Friday. And I mean, at 50%, we were like, there's no way we're going to survive. Although now I'm like 50%, that seems great. And then at 25%, we were like, what are we going to do, and who are we going to choose to work this, and how is this all going to work out? And it's pretty amazing how fast it started collapse, like everything. It wasn't this. It's not like we were watching other countries and seeing what's happening. We're like, it's coming for us. It's like we were all so unprepared here. So it just, basically at the same time as everybody, we made the decision to close the restaurant. And we called up every staff member and we were like, we're so sorry, but we're going to have to close it. It'll probably just be like a week, maybe 2. But we'll see you soon. And I had a couple of people come back with me to the restaurant, and we cleaned up and we sort of shut it down for what we figured would probably be a month. Like, we wrapped up all the plates and threw everything else that we could. We donated as much of it as possible. And then we just sort of sat there for a while and like, what are we going to do? And, I looked at them and I sort of immediately understood that most of my staff was actually probably better off than a lot of the other staff around the city because we don't have tipping here. So this was before the first stimulus was passed. But that meant that at least most of my servers and my kitchen staff would be at the top of unemployment in the city because I had to put them on unemployment. I only had enough money in my bank really to maybe pay the rent for a month, pay off some of my bills, and that was it. We don't keep a huge bank account. And so I was like, yeah, everybody has to go on unemployment. I'm really sorry, but at least you're going to be at the top of it. And actually, by the time the stimulus came out, they sort of did just fine. So kudos to me for having decided to go no tipping 5 years ago. But I didn't know that it was going to be good for a pandemic. I couldn't have planned. And then we constantly checked in with our staff, made sure that they were okay, see if they needed anything. That's when I started my career on Zoom as a square on a screen. And we just tried to be there for them. And then I guess within that first week, I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, really talking about, here we are, the restaurant industry is closed, and I don't know how long it's going to be closed for, but how are we going to reset this restaurant industry? Because clearly it's broken. Everybody thinks I'm semi-successful, but I closed my restaurant, and I only have a month left of funds to sort of keep it closed, and that's not enough of a buffer. And I've clearly not given my employees enough of a safety net, even with not having tipping. I knew they weren't saving a lot of money with what I was paying them, and that felt devastating to me, that here I am sort of considered a good business owner and good to my employees, but the reality is none of us had a safety net. And so I wanted to talk about that in the op-ed and how this was really a chance to reset the industry. And
let me interrupt to say that there were 2 seminal pieces restaurant owners wrote at the start of the pandemic. They were both in the New York Times. One was Gabrielle Hamilton talking about closing Prune and what it was like to try to please customers, and an elegy of New York. Amanda came on like a fire engine saying, here is what it is like to do the books in a restaurant every week. Here is what my rent costs. Here is what my labor costs. Here's what it is going to be like to have to close. And here are the challenges the restaurants, especially in Manhattan, in New York City, face, and what it's going to be like to try to come out of it. So it lit a fire under other restaurant owners and all of us who observe the industry, because even if you didn't train as a journalist, you did exactly what journalists are supposed to do. You gave specifics and you told stories, and you made it come alive in a way that just riveted all of us. Please go on.
Oh, well, thank you. Very good editors at the New York Times. And sort of, it'll probably come up at some point, but at that point, I kind of made a promise that I've closed my restaurant, but I'm not going to reopen the same restaurant I closed. And we've sort of been skirting around these issues as much of an industry as we were, but we all know we don't pay our employees enough. We all know most of us don't give enough benefits. And another reality is we don't really charge enough for food, and we're sort of in this push and pull with customers where everybody's losing. Nobody's winning in this battle. That's actually how I ended up joining the IRC, because they were like, oh, they had formed maybe like 2 or 3 days beforehand. And they called me up. I think maybe it was Will and Phil Baltz called me up, and they were like, hey, do you want to come on? There's a bunch of chefs who are trying to figure out how we're going to get through this pandemic. And I was like, well, I don't have a job anymore. So yeah, I'll see you at 8 a.m. And
I'll decode it slightly. The Independent Restaurant Coalition, a group of restaurants around the country. When you say Will, you mean Will Guidara, formerly
Will Guidara,
of Madison Park, now opening his own restaurant group. And who else did you say?
Phil Baltz from Baltz and Company, who runs one of the PR companies in the city. It was sort of like a ragtag group of people who joined, and from all different parts of the industry. And I flipped on my screen the first time, had no idea who was going to be there, and it was sort of the best community ever. And all of us were struggling. All of us were like, oh, wow, yeah, we don't have any money left in the bank, and we're not going to survive. We each came to it with different amounts of debt. I actually probably more fortunate than most restaurants. I don't have a lot of debt because I run it on COD. I run it on COD, so I didn't have a lot that I owed to people. But I still had to pay rent, and I was like, I don't know, my landlord seems pretty uncompromising here, and how am I going to end up dealing with my employees? And the longer my employees aren't with me, it means I'm going to lose them, right? And so there's no guarantee that 2 months or 3 months from now, I'm going to have any employees who want to come back and work for me. And that would be devastating, because I don't know how to start a restaurant from scratch again.
Wow. I'm going to want to come back to that and what the IRC did, but when you're talking about losing your employees, the incredibly difficult decisions of closing, I wonder, John, you also faced kind of mass closing of a lot of properties. Could you tell us about that and what the decision process was like?
Corby, we have 27 hotels in total. And going back to March of last year, it was so ironic. We had our senior leadership, about 115 people, at our hotel in Arlington, Texas, Live by Loews Arlington. It had just opened. It had been open for about 3 months, 300 rooms, 30,000 square feet of meeting space. Our entire team was there. And we do this gathering once a year. And hour by hour, minute by minute, we saw a real cascading of business being canceled. The GM of our hotel in Miami Beach, Loews Miami Beach, would get an email that this group canceled. The GM and the head of sales for our hotels in Orlando, where we have 8 hotels in a joint venture with Universal, at Universal Studios Orlando, were getting emails. And literally, it was like happening in slow motion as we are seeing every piece of business cancel. And we were all together, so we were all crying on each other's shoulders. And came back to New York. Obviously, everything shut down. And there were moments when you have 27 hotels, and we're certainly not as big as the Hiltons, the Hyatts, the Marriotts, but there were moments where I knew that our team members, and we went into the pandemic having about 10,500 team members, I knew that our team members were going to be in a very, very difficult position. Like Amanda noted, we all thought that maybe it was 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. We never thought that it would last as long as it did. My wife tells me that there were nights where she could feel me lying in bed staring at the ceiling. And that's exactly what I was doing, was trying to figure out how we can ensure that our team members get through this, and they get through it with their families, obviously keep them safe, keep them sound. And as time went on, and through my involvement, I'm Chairman Emeritus of the U.S. Travel Association. I'm a former chair of the American Hotel and Lodging Association. Both industry groups mobilized immediately. We had calls every week to first and foremost figure out how we're going to take care of our team members. We stood up a fund at Loews Hotels with a couple $1 million in it, and team members were able to apply for grants, and that helped many of them get through. And you would read these letters, and literally, you would cry. You felt so badly for them, and we were able to help them a bit through that. So here we are 14 months later. 26 of our 27 hotels have reopened. Our 8th hotel in Orlando will open in about 2 weeks, and then we will be fully operational again. Corby, I mentioned to you a moment ago that here in New York, our Loews Regency Hotel on Park Avenue opened about 2 weeks ago. We are seeing a surge of business, which obviously we are very pleased about. We have our team members back, many of whom have been with us for 25, 30, even 35 years. They have returned. They are thrilled to be there. They're offering the kind of service that we're very proud of at Loews Hotels. But there were some moments when I would speak with our executive leadership team, and I just could feel the emptiness in the phone call or the Zoom because nobody had an answer. We're fortunate that we have Loews Corporation as a parent, and we got through it, and we're starting to rebuild. Business is coming back around the country. Some markets are stronger than others, but we're feeling pretty good about the future.
It's wonderful to hear that. But going back to depressing topics or crises, is there anything you helped lead the industry and New York City, especially through the response to September 11th? You were active in going to New Orleans after Katrina and helping the industry. Was any of what you saw then and the decisions you had to make, did any of it apply to the pandemic?
Well, certainly our city and our industry have faced challenges before. Nothing that was a global pandemic, nothing that really prepared us for what we saw locally, nationally, internationally. When every source of revenue dries up at the same time, transient, business travel, group travel, international, all stopping at exactly the same moment, we weren't prepared for that. But what I learned from my father, who the series is named after, and we are very appreciative of the Aspen Institute to have these kinds of conversations in Bob Tisch's name, who was such an incredible human being. But what I learned from him in the 1970s, when the Daily News ran a headline that said President Ford to New York City dropped dead, and he started meeting with people like Lou Rudin and Felix Roden and other leaders at the time, and they would meet at the Regency Hotel. And that actually is where the term power breakfast started, literally as these men and women were getting together to try to figure out how to save New York in the 70s. And then through 9/11, when then Mayor Giuliani asked me to head up what we call New York Rising, about putting together a group, understanding that we all bring something to the conversation, putting aside your individual concerns, working together towards the greater good. It was the first time, as I had been advocating, that hotels, restaurants, Broadway, cultural attractions, retail, were all in this together. And it was at that moment, actually, that we changed the name of what was the New York City Convention and Visitors Bureau to NYC Company, to send a clear message that our industries, our related industries, are New York City's business. We learned a lot through 9/11. We did a year later take a group with Christine Nicholas, who was then the CEO of NYC Company. We went down to New Orleans. We spent 5 days there to help them through their very difficult moments, their tragedy. And I guess, Corby, the answer is, as it relates to many things that we experience in life, is to keep talking, to understand that you bring a certain expertise. The people that you're working with have their background, their area of focus, and that's how you're going to get through it together. We stood up a committee at NYC Company the week after we knew that this was going to last a long time, under the leadership of Charlie Flateman, the current chair of NYC Company, Fred Dixon, our CEO. And once again, the once thought of disparate entities of travel and tourism, restaurants, hotels, retail, Broadway, all came together. We would meet once every other week and just talk about how we're going to get through this together. So by talking, by listening to each other, by using our past experiences, that's how we got through March, April, May, June. Things started to open up a little bit. We got the surge again in the fall. We all hunkered down. And as my friends in the restaurant industry can totally appreciate, where we thought we were on maybe a better track. Things went in the reverse direction. And here we are today, 14 months later, optimistic, still issues out there, but we're in a much better place.
You have perfectly queued up Russell, who is going to pick up on everything you just said. But before he does, I've got one follow-up question. It's so noteworthy that we've got two leaders, Amanda and Russell, who are following exactly what you're talking about. And you titled your best-selling book, The Power of We, to exemplify. When you talk about your father and the group of men incredibly loyal to New York who decided, okay, even if the future of New York looks really dim, it's practically in bankruptcy, here's what we're going to do to rescue it. During the pandemic, there was a worry that maybe individuals who were in a position to help weren't as loyal to New York City because world and money and venture funds and hedge funds have become more globalized. So has it been more a phenomenon of the groups of similar industry members, which also cues up Russell, to come together as you were describing? Has the group of people who really show leadership changed from kind of individuals that your father teamed up with in the 70s before the city dropped dead to industry groups?
Well, certainly there is a confluence of the big names when it comes to lodging, and they were not as large or as multi-player as they are today. So when you look at Marriott having 15 hotels in the city, when you look at Hilton, when you look at IHG, they had spatterings of hotels. There were more independent players, but even the large multinational companies understand their responsibility. And that's why organizations like NYC Company are so important. I did an interview with the New York Times, and I said, look, the perception is as long as Broadway is closed, New York City is closed. So we are all in this together. These two restaurateurs who have done an amazing job creating an environment and experience that people flock to.
Yeah, okay.
They're in this together. We are all in this together. And that's what we've come to understand, is that when there's unemployment in the lodging industry, there's going to be unemployment in restaurants, in retail, and things are better, but we got a long way to go. The city is facing some enormous challenges, but the will is there. The means are there to have these conversations, and we will figure it out. We figured it out in the 70s. We figured it out after 9/11. We figured it out in the financial crisis of 07, 08. We will figure it out, but we have to do it by talking and working together.
Right. Russell, thank you. You have given us through our weekly meetings, which I miss like incredibly, a sort of double vision. It was what was happening down the block and in your neighborhood of Harlem and with everybody's landlord, your own landlord, who wasn't anybody's dream of a landlord.
Nope.
And then what it was like, your friends in San Francisco, your friends in Chicago, your friends in Los Angeles. Can you tell us something about that roller coaster and whether it like exactly paralleled your neighborhood or what it's been like to try to help people ride it as well as ride it yourself?
Well, you know, and going back to even what Amanda was saying in the beginning was that when this happened, there were so many different elements of things that took us by surprise. You know, we all, with the shutdown occurring, and for Reverence and for my team, we were seeing, sadly, effects of it as early as December, and looking in hindsight and looking at our numbers and how things were going. So it was really rough for us by the time we had gotten to March. And we built this restaurant with the mandate of being able to serve the community and to be an amenity that Harlem deserved. And as sadly as I have learned over the period of time that I've been a restaurant owner here, I'm the only fine dining African-American chef owner in Manhattan or in New York. And since 1988, since Patrick Clark. And that, to me, that's mind blowing. But that aside, when all of this happened, we had already had a very, very clear understanding that the restaurant industry itself was broken, and that all of the systemic issues that we knew existed basically imploded our industry in a matter of 2 weeks. And we all, again, we run on these small, inefficient margins. We have sourcing and the ability for trying to get product, our food chain, everything, all of that's been broken for years. And we've managed as an industry to sort of hobble through it all of this time. But when the pandemic set on top of us, it was over. And then in starting to kind of peel back the initial shock and all of us saying, okay, now what's next? What do we do? And who do we look to for help? And when it became very, very clear, and Corby, you unfortunately have heard me whiff on for over a year about this every week.
There's nothing more fun.
And complaining about our state and local government between the infighting and the bullying and the misdirection and miscommunication and all of their failures. And as we've seen it happen in so many other states, their incredible failures of coming and rising to the occasion. And what we found out was that we as restaurateurs weren't going to be saved by anybody, that we had to, for the first time, really pull our act, pull up our bootstraps, get organized, get together, be open, transparent, and work together to a common goal. And having, in the first 3 or 4 months, I'd gotten asked to be a part of different organizations and speak on behalf of different ideas. And now being a board member of One Fair Wage and High Roads Kitchen and the Aspen Institute, and now thanks to Amanda, part of IRC, having that sort of clarity of all of these different agendas and ideas, and all of us really thinking on the same plane of here's what we need to do to hopefully fix our industry and make it better. And today that's where we're at. It's what's next for us. Like we've kind of managed to survive. And there is a tremendous amount of destruction there. We've lost so many great restaurateurs, so many great hotels, so much historic, like that fabric of our industry is gone now. And we have to think about what and how we want to be going forward in the future. And that there are aspects of clarifying to people that things are going to be different, that the good old days don't exist. It's like 9/11. Well, we've lived through a daily 9/11, right? And that when 9/11 happened, whether you on the West Coast, East Coast, or in the Central States, life was different. How you live is different today. And that from this experience is going to be the same way. And definitively how you go to a movie, how you take an airplane, how you eat out, how you do takeout, all of these things are going to be different. And people have to grow accustomed to the fact that the world is a different place. And this is by far not over. And we're just, obviously we're now just starting to, sorry, my father just called in. He had surgery this morning, so I'll talk to him later.
Life intervenes. It does for all of us. Can I interrupt? Because it's all perfect, and I'm going to be asking you, how is life going to change? But Amanda, when Russell says the fabric of the restaurant industry started to change, I think of you two as reweaving the fabric of the restaurant industry. And Amanda, what has it been like both to come together, and could you tell us a little something about moving into the idea of lobbying for restaurant relief funds federally, which came to a huge success?
Yeah, us coming together as restaurateurs was like my dream. I've wanted this for years, and we do call ourselves the restaurant industry, but we're not an industry. We were just sort of like separate restaurants doing the same thing, not talking to each other. You might know your neighbor, but you don't really know each other's business and how it works. And there's a couple people you might ask, like, oh, what are you paying your head chef or something? I don't know what the questions are, but we're just not together. We're not all fighting to make this industry better. And there's been so many times when I think that we should have been in the past like couple of years. So when I first joined the call, it was pretty amazing. We were like people from chefs from all over the country, restaurateurs, and it was like, oh, this is the industry right here, and we are all together for really the first time fighting for the industry, which is really important. We learned on the fly how to do what we did, and there were some really exciting people who were like able to get some lobbyists from Washington. I can't remember who had the connections, but very, very early on, somebody was like, oh, I know this person. I think they know this person. I've worked with this person. And sort of overnight, we had like the most amazing lobbyists in Washington who were like, yeah, you're going to have to do a lot of work too, basically. And they taught us, they were like, you need to start calling people who, your senators and your Republicans, and you need to start telling them how devastating this is for the restaurant industry. And a couple really fascinating things happened through that. One, we learned how little Washington knows about the restaurant industry, which is pretty amazing. Like I know people don't really know, but this is, as it turns out, a huge, huge industry. We are the second biggest employer after the federal government. We employed like 16 million people. It's insane how many and how much money sort of we filter through. And the reality is, as Russell was saying, our margins suck. They're so slim. But that means that we're putting all that money back into the economy. For every 90 cents we take, or for every dollar that we take in, somewhere between 90 and 95 cents goes back out the door. We're a huge part of the U.S. economy. And so for Washington to not really understand that, and sort of when we started hearing these numbers, it was like these light bulbs going off in all our heads. And we also had these lobbyists telling us, Washington works for you. You elect them. So
I see a wry smile from John Tisch. Washington works for you.
No, the reason I'm smiling is that Amanda is so right about how we need to speak together. And the lodging industry, as I said, I'm a former chair of the American Hotel and Lodging Industry. And I remember 20 years ago going to Capitol Hill and looking at a man or woman who's in the House, who represents a district in a state. And I would say to them, sir, ma'am, do you know that there are more people who work in travel and tourism and the lodging industry in your state than make automobiles, than are in farming? And they wouldn't get it. The reason I was chuckling is that as Amanda was making such a good point, I had a lobbyist 20 years ago in Washington. Every time we would go to Capitol Hill, he would warn me. He said, they look at your industry as roadkill. They don't get what you do. And I'm just proud because over 20 years, we have educated a number of them. So there are men and women who represent areas of this country who get what we do. And it is just very reassuring and makes me feel better about now how the restaurant industry is coming together. There is the National Restaurant Association, but this grassroots effort, let me finish my sentence, this grassroots effort of people like Amanda and Russell and so many others, it's really important.
Yeah, and I'm not against the National Restaurant Association, even though I was smiling. It's just they don't represent necessarily independent restaurants. And we might have very polar opposite things we want. So they might, we both have restaurant in our name, but very different some of the time.
Yeah, it's apples and oranges.
Amanda, how about, and Russell, people you feel a la John educating a couple of lawmakers? This is the significance of the industry. We all read the very nice piece by Brett Anderson in the New York Times, kind of crediting the Independent Restaurant Coalition with $28.6 billion in the Restaurant Relief Fund, of the Restaurant Relief Fund in the Recovery Act to IRC. But do you feel that you have some insight more into what it's like for lawmakers? Do you think that anybody besides Chuck Schumer, like the two authors of the original Restaurants Act, like they get you? Russell, I'm an optimist. Aren't you going to say yes, they completely get it?
No, well, okay. So obviously we've talked sadly about this at length. And we just had a series of meetings in the last week with the IRC. And, you know, it's politics. Sadly, it's always politics. The reality of the 26.8, which our original ask was what, 150, Amanda?
120.
120. 26.8 is, as they want us to call it, a down payment. And the reality is that 397, and correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, Amanda, I think it was 397 or 348,000 restaurants applied to the RRF for the first 21 days, which is now closed. Of that, the estimate for the amount of money needed to cover that initial group, the first tranche group, is $75 billion.
And wasn't it prioritizing veterans, women, and minority-owned businesses? They were the only ones eligible to apply.
That's right.
Well, everybody can apply, but those groups that are earmarked were going to get first bite of the apple. And as one of a couple of African Americans on the IRC board, in listening to how different people that are on the currently on the IRC board talked about their advocacy and their want and their demand to make sure that the disenfranchised that have been disenfranchised for years got the first bite, was amazing to hear. It was beyond encouraging. And, you know, and in the same respect, we want to fight as hard as we can to make sure that they get taken care of as well, because they deserve it. Not just because they did this, but because they are my brother. They are my sister. They are the same people, no matter what food they serve, Amanda, in your vegetarian cuisine, or whether we're serving California cuisine. We're all the same. And it's the guy in Texas who sued us, and the guy in Georgia that sued us. They deserve it too. But, you know, Congress has to act. Congress has to do their part and think about the long-term ramifications, about the culture of this country, about the economy of this country.
Everybody in the audience is hearing what the voice of the industry sounds like, and the emerging industry leadership sounds like right here. John, I'm asking both Amanda at Dirt Candy and Russell at Reverence what they see the future and how that's going to change. But do you see the hotel industry or even the tourism industry as making permanent changes based on the past year's challenges? Or is it, let's get back to normal and turn our back on the past?
No, I think that we are making permanent changes. I think, look, we have all understood, and especially for us, and I'm proud of the culture that we have at Loews Hotels. I'm third generation to be honored to run this company. And what started with my grandparents and my father and mother, my aunt and my uncle, and I run Loews Corporation with two siblings, but even my sister Lori, who you know well, and her dedication to the Aspen Institute. What we have understood from minute one is that we can't do anything without the women and men who are part of our organization. As I say, I'm sitting in my office on 61st Street, but I'm honored to be on with all of you, but I'm not making the beds. I am not cooking, thank God. I am not bringing the bags to the room. I am not working at a pool in Miami when it's 95 degrees and 120% humidity. The formerly 10,000 people, now unfortunately 6,000 men and women who are part of our organization, they do these jobs every single day, and they do them in a manner that makes us care about them, care about our customers. And Corby and your group have done so much in terms of safety and security, and a lot of what you guys came out with will continue. There are protocols that once we get past this moment in time, will continue. How do we keep our guests safe? How do we keep our team members safe? How do we show that we care about the community? That will continue. I would say that also, as we face labor shortages in certain markets, we are learning how to do more with less. And I think there is a re-examination of our cost structure that will continue. So there are elements that we'll never go back to. There are things that we did that we will never go back to. We have to learn how to really react quickly. As I'm sure Amanda and Russell know, there are supply chain interruptions every step of the way. We're about to start construction on a new hotel, and we're working with our contractor to figure out how we're going to get this thing built when we can't guarantee that there's going to be steel, that there's going to be wood on time. So we're all learning how to deal and adapt. And for those that are going to be successful, they're going to look at the past and say, yes, I did it this way, and this is how I used to think about it, but I got to think differently now. But you can think differently, you can operate differently, you can try to be more efficient. You can never, ever forget how important your team members are and how every single interaction, we have to exceed our guests' expectations.
That's a tough challenge. Amanda at Dirt Candy. First of all, you both are now involved in One Fair Wage and trying to, just what John was saying about putting the workers first and thinking very much about their well-being in every way. Do you see changes happening in the tipping that allowed your employees to get much higher unemployment reimbursement because everything was factored into their actual salary? Do you see changes happening? And also, I'm anticipating one of the questions in the Q&A, which is, are you in crouching position waiting for the next COVID, or are you just assuming I've put my procedures in place, I'm going to be okay?
Okay, if there's another COVID, I'm out. Let's be clear.
No.
I'm not doing this again. I mean, just personally, we built our patio outside. I served all winter in a snowsuit. Like, I am not doing that again. I only have 2 more years left on this lease. I'm out.
And Amanda was one of the case studies that we showed when taxis careen into outdoor spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we have the protocols, but I just don't have the stamina. I mean, running the restaurant during that, it was really, really hard. And I just had a core staff of 6 that I kept on. We worked way too hard and our hours were too long. We were just like, keep the flame burning. I mean, it was basically like Hanukkah. We were like, just keep the flame burning and we'll get to the end of it. But I think they would all quit too. Another 14 months. Oh, so no, to answer that question, I think the industry is changing. I think it's really slow. This isn't an overnight change. But sitting on the calls with everybody on the IRC, and I'm also involved in another group called the Hospitality United Alliance, which is about sort of smaller restaurants like mine all around the country. We get together every once in a while and talk, and most of them have actually moved to sort of a non-tipping model, or they've added an administrative fee and they're charging a lot more. It's different in New York. We have the most archaic laws, and so nobody else has to deal with what we deal with here. It's very bizarre. But so, yeah, they're really rethinking how they're going to treat their employees. And I mean, that came out of sort of the summer. It was a summer of reckoning for a lot of restaurateurs. And I think, the whole country, we had the Black Lives Movement. Lots of people posted those black squares and they're like, we're going to change. And some people have it, and not everybody has, but certainly a lot of the people in the groups that I'm talking to have. We also spent a year talking about restaurant workers and like delivery drivers as essential workers. We propped them up. We were like, these are the people who are supporting us, and these are the heroes. There's doctors and nurses, and the guy who delivers my pizza once a week. And I feel like that was a huge recognition. And for a lot of people, they're like, yeah, we can't go back. So, I mean, I've certainly changed my business model, but I'm not the only one. I know of many, many restaurateurs who have also changed their business model to pay their employees more, to be able to offer more benefits. I just happen to maybe have a higher profile.
And let's just say Amanda is one of the national spokespeople for eliminating tipping and building it into salaries and investing for a number of years. Russell, you've gotten religion because you're now part of One Fair Wage, and I'm sure it never occurred to you before that to treat workers well. So I'm glad.
No. I was One Fair Wage before One Fair Wage was One Fair Wage in San Francisco. We were running my last restaurant, bricks and mortar restaurant in 2009, was running that program. And people fought it all along the way. I spent a ton of time in the district attorney's office and tons of attorneys and just dealing with it constantly. And now what I was trying to do there is now the law of the land. So, you know, in building this restaurant here, we made sure to, you know, we pay above a living wage here. We have a structured service charge that we've been working in, and we're, as a group, you know, even though it's a bit of a pirate ship, there is a small amount of democracy in allowing everybody's voice to be heard, to make unified decisions, and that we're thinking about, again, what's next, how to best benefit everybody, because I'm not in this alone. You know, behind this camera, there are 3 other people grinding it out for tonight's service and carrying the weight, you know, to help me to create and craft a unique experience for people. And we do that every day. You know, we do that every day. And like, I'm so proud of this crew, and nobody get a big head about this. The fact that we followed all the protocols, we followed the science with all the recommendations that were coming down to us. And there were plenty of times in some of those Aspen meetings where everybody was looking at us and going, I don't know what you guys are thinking about doing that way, where we followed the ideas and the philosophies, and not one of us got sick. Yes, we had a couple of third-party, fourth-party COVID scares, which we went into lockdown and got our testing done, but not a single family member got COVID. None of us got sick. We stayed consistently open from the second week of the closure until now, which we are now reopened for indoor dining at a limited capacity, which will stay till the end of the year in this pattern, because it's smarter, it's safer, it's more controllable. And, you know, customers appreciate the fact that we're looking out for their behalf and taking care of ours. So, you know.
Good. Amanda has her hand up, and I have a question for John. Amanda, hand up.
Thank you. Well, I was just going to say, you know, like a restaurateur like Russell or like me, we actually need groups like the IRC, and this is what, you know, I think it ultimately will turn into. And this is why I was so excited to see everybody on the screen together finally starting to talk about these issues, because to do good, you are punished. So it's very hard to run a good restaurant without feeling like the government is working against you, even though you're actually working twice as hard for the government. You pay a lot in taxes, you pay a lot in insurance, like it just comes at you all around. And so it's hard if you're like a normal restaurateur and you're like, well, I want to do that. And I think there's so many good restaurateurs out there who want to do that. They're like, but how can I afford this? It doesn't make any sense. And so that's why a group like IRC was really, really needed.
Absolutely right. And there's another group called, I think, Rebuilding Opportunities for All Restaurants, ROAR. And for everybody who's been admiring your pink bandana, it is a product of ROAR. You could all go on the website and donate and get a bandana like hers. John, one of our questions is about New York City. And do you think New York City is suffering more than other American cities because tourism is such an important part of the economy?
Well, unfortunately, the suffering started when the city was shut down. And fortunately, our healthcare workers, our frontline workers, Amanda and Russell have referred to them, they stepped up in a big way. But no other city was impacted in terms of what we saw as the crisis of COVID, the fear, the deaths, the intubations, the hospital visits. It was really scary. And clearly the media was running with it because that's what sells newspapers and that's what puts eyeballs on TVs and social media. And so we were having to deal with the ramifications of our despair and our fear being broadcast all over the world. You also mentioned, Corby, that today tourism, travel and tourism related industries are an enormous part of the economy of New York City. And Mayor Bloomberg understood that, and he upped the budget. He asked me to chair NYC Company, which I did for 8 years. And we've seen it in many other ways. And now the federal government and Mayor de Blasio have allocated $30 million for a marketing campaign for New York City that NYC Company will run. The campaign will start in June to try to get people back. But we've got people now staying at our hotels. They're not here on a business trip. They're here to eat in Dirt Candy. They're here to eat in Reverence. They are here because they want to come to New York. They want to support us. In September, they can start going to a Broadway show. Obviously, there are 15,000 people, probably most of them New Yorkers or the tri-state region, that are going to Madison Square Garden to root the Knicks on. At MetLife Stadium in September, hopefully we're going to have 82,000 people to root on the Giants. So we're getting there, but we were so constrained. And I think we were all scared. We were all really scared because nobody knew where this was going. So we are coming together. We are starting to feel better about things. It's been commented on. We are far from out of the woods, but we're getting there. And that message is emanating around the country and around the world. Now, when you see that the EU is saying they're getting ready to open up their borders, they're getting ready to allow their residents and their citizens to come here, well, there's only one problem. We're not open yet. And so we have to have these conversations through the State Department, through other means to say, let the international traveler come back. It's safe here in the United States. It's safe here in New York. The cases are down and the numbers are vastly improved. We need these people. The international traveler stays longer and they spend more money. So once again, if you look at all of the various demand generators, transient, business, group, international, for us to get back to where we were, we need everything to start improving, be open, and then we will all feel better about the recovery.
Great. And you've given us an idea of what people need to do. They need to come back. And our last question is to Amanda Grusky. What can everybody on this call do to help you on your road to recovery at Dirt Candy, at Reverence, and the restaurant business? What do we diners do to help you? Call to action.
Oh, well, it's pretty easy. We have some very expensive bottles of wine.
You take on a rotten margin, but the margin's good on wine.
That's right. You just buy a couple of those. We can still do takeout wine in New York. That's buy a bottle for here, buy like 2 or 3 or a case for home. That's the best thing you can do. Or really just come spend money. Come visit us. Come say hello again. Sort of to follow up with what Jonathan was saying. I'm a tourist restaurant. I'm a tourist destination. So I need the tourists. And if I'm not going to see them for a while, I really need the neighbors to come and say hi and get to know us and spend some money.
Yeah, I think that we were really, as going back and looking at the last year and a half we'd opened up just a couple of months before the pandemic struck, and doing the analysis for what we had done in 2019, for the short period of 2019, what we did in 2020, we didn't have, it was really shocking to see how much business we were doing, not only based on tourism, but based on Broadway. Shocked at how much business we were doing from Broadway. So we're really excited about the fact that Broadway's coming back. And I'm really, really looking forward to this fall when we feel like tourism is going to be back into a heavy swing again. For us right now, it's we are open again. And the fact that this is a super small restaurant, we're literally serving 12 people a night, 3 nights a week. That's it. So, we love having full houses every night and being able to entertain people and being able to push our craft farther along. And that's,
I'm going to wager that every single person who has been on this webinar today and everybody who hears it is going to come to Reverence at Dirt Candy and want to be welcomed by you.
Oh, they should spend the night in a hotel though. Yeah, but also they should spend the night in a
At the
hotel.
Regency.
That's what I'm
where I
thinking.
get-
There should be
I
a
can't wait
package,
to
there should be a
have-
travel package of stay at Lowe's, have lunch at Dirty Candy, and, and then come to dinner at Reverence. Yeah.
That works.
Okay, we've got our marching orders. I am about to invite Linda Lehrer back, but I have to thank both our inspirational panelists. All of you who want to know what Russell Jackson does on his last Sunday of leisure will be able to see him in a Sunday routines, where I hope that safety first is the star, and the Aspen Institute Safety First would not exist were if not for the vision and leadership of Lori, Lizzie, and Jonathan Tisch. I want to thank them very much personally, and thank this group for the weekly inspiration that brought us here together. And thank you, Linda, for hosting us today.
Thank you, Corby. And thank you, Amanda, John, and Russell, for a wonderful conversation. You will be seeing me this weekend at your restaurants. And for those of you who want to get more information about the Safety First report, I believe we've just put a link to the report in the chat box, but you can also go on www.aspeninstitute.org, and there's a copy of the report, and find a copy as well. So again, thank you to the Tisch family for supporting the Great Leaders Program, to the Lori M. Tisch Illumination Fund, and to all of you for coming and listening to what I think was an illuminating and